Session 5, Ambassadors on the Global Navigation of U.S. China Relations. Please welcome Ambassador Kathleen Stevens, Board Chair of Korea Society and former Ambassador to Korea. Singapore Ambassador Louis Tuck Yu. Thailand Ambassador Suriya Chindawongse. There will be no Q&A for this session, and I'm going to hand it off to Ambassador Stevens. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the fifth and final public session, and I think it's perhaps fitting that not only are we talking about global navigation of U.S. and China relations, after the variety of subjects already mentioned, but that we're doing it with two distinguished diplomats who are responsible for navigation closer to shore from very important countries, important allies and partners and friends of the United States, and also having very, very important relations in the region and with China. I was struck as I looked at our program by the biographical sketches of both Ambassador Liu and Ambassador Chindawongse, and it reminded me of something that I've often noticed, and it's that, I'm not sure the opposite is true, but our allies and partners always send their best diplomats and their most talented people to be ambassadors to the United States. And if you read this, you'll know that what I'm saying is true, and I'm not going to read this to you, but I was also I wanted to highlight for you as we start our conversation that Ambassador Louis came to the United States after two previous consecutive, I guess you'd say, ambassadorial appointments to Japan, and then China, and then here. And you've been here about a year and a half, I understand. That's right. And Ambassador Chindawongse, I hope I'm saying your name fairly correctly,
yes, very good.
Was ambassador to Singapore, and also has deep multilateral experience, leading Thailand's leadership in the ASEAN year and as Thailand's permanent representative at the UN. So I hope this gives you a sense of what I'd like to kind of cover, and I hope it'll be a conversation amongst you both as well as with me. But maybe if I could start off with you, Ambassador Liu, with global navigation, the other thing I noticed is that some years ago you were a naval officer.
For more than 20 years.
And you were the Chief of Navy of Singapore, so this is named after you. And certainly Singapore, not only you, has long been regarded as a very successful global navigator in very complex geopolitical currents. We might say the same of Thailand as well. But I wonder if maybe each of you, but we'll start with you, Ambassador Liu, could just give us a sense of how you would characterize Singapore's approach to its relationship with China and the United States, respectively, and what you see from Singapore's perspective in particular, and your own experience, the major challenges.
Well, if I may start with Singapore-U.S. relations, I would describe it as multifaceted and deep. Some of you will know that we cooperate very, very closely on defense, simply because we are aligned in terms of our common interests and a shared strategic outlook. If I hark back to the 1990s, when the US had to leave the Philippines, Singapore felt that it was really critical to keep the US engaged, present, and committed in our part of the world. And so we signed an MOU to allow the US to make use of our naval and air bases. Okay, and we have since developed that relationship even further. Today, the US is the largest foreign user of those bases. And in turn, we are the second largest, we have the second largest detachment under training in the US, particularly from the Air Force. 30 years in Arizona with our F-16s, 15 years in Idaho with the F-15s, and next year we will start a F-35 detachment in Arkansas. So that's the security part. On trade and investments, some of you may not know that the cumulative investments from US companies in the 10 ASEAN countries, cumulatively over the years, is larger than what you have ever invested in China, Japan, Korea, India, combined. Okay? So in the 10 countries, 650 million people is much more than what you have invested in those 4 countries with 3 billion people. On trade, very robust relationship bilaterally between the US and China. Good free trade agreement that goes back 20 years. Trade has tripled since then. And because the Trump administration is coming in, I'll be shouting from the top of the roofs that we run a deficit with the United States. It is a deficit for trade in goods, it's a deficit for trade in services, it is a growing deficit, and I can't emphasize the word deficit enough times. And just to juxtapose it with, anyway, jump forward to the relations with China very briefly. We have a very strong trade relationship with China too, but we run a surplus with China. So again, deficit with the US, surplus with China. But I use the term multifaceted because we cooperate with the US in many other areas. Cybersecurity. We signed a recent agreement on civil nuclear energy cooperation. We are in the Artemis program. We have a critical and emerging technologies dialogue that covers AI, biotech, quantum, and we are one of 4 bilateral partners that you have, so on and so forth. But I would say that the strength of that relationship in all these different areas centers on the strength of a B2B relationship. Now, sorry if this has taken up too much time. With China, it is a very much G2G relationship, probably more narrowly focused on the investment, on the trade aspects. China is our largest trading partner, certainly largest for trade in goods, second to the US for trade in services, third after the US in trade in services. But it's also a very strong relationship because it's structured at the G2G level. So we have annual meetings between the deputy prime ministers of both countries. We meet with their key provincial leaders. We identify projects that we can do together with the push from the government to advance that cooperation. So in Suzhou was one that we started 30 years ago at a time when China was industrializing. And so we recognize the need to work with them, probably to extend also some degree of software transfer. And then another project with Tianjin, when they were looking at greening, eco, and so on. And so we started an eco city, not on a greenfield site, it was really a brownfield site, and we had to clean up significant hazardous material and contamination over the years. And the most recent one is actually in Chongqing, when there was a need to further develop the Western region, enhance connectivity from the Western region to different parts of the world. And so we worked with them on it. So I would say that both relationships are very important to a small country like Singapore, because being where we are, being as small as we are, being friends with as many countries as possible, big or small, near or far, that's important to us. So maybe I better stop there.
No, a lot more to ask you, but I want to turn to you now, Ambassador,
Yes.
and kind of a similar question. I mean, again, Thailand and the U.S. also have a very
Yes.
long-standing security partnership, an important economic relationship, but of course Thailand has very large relations, especially economic relationship with China. How do you see, and I don't want to use the word balance because some people don't like that word, and maybe it's not a balance, but how do you see it? And I guess I'd add on, and I'll ask Ambassador Liu about this too. In a time of U.S.-China tensions, does that complicate things for you?
Well, I was never in the Navy, so I'm not knowing much about navigation. But it is, I guess, in the Thai historical context, navigation, bending with the wind, making friends with all partners, enemies to none. That is part of our DNA because, again, as a small country, we have to do the best we can for the people of our country. So I'll just give the brief historical context, if I may, for Thailand with the United States. Many might not know this, but it's the security relationship may have started formally, let's say, in the 1960s with a sort of like a mutual defense arrangement between the two countries, but it is in the context of 191 years. Many of you may not know this. The country which the United States has the longest standing relationship in terms of a treaty partner is Thailand. We beat Japan by a couple of years. So we've been there a while, but our relationship is not just security, as you alluded to, Ambassador. It's also very much economic. The treaty that was signed in 191 years ago was economic based. How to promote commerce between the two countries. And fast forward to nowadays, the economic relationship is as important as the security one. The United States is always in the top 3 trading partner, always in the top 5 investment partner. We are, for example, most latest is that in January, just about a week ago, we have Amazon announcing $5 billion of investments in terms of data centers and cloud services in China. And that's just part of the the broader picture of the economic engagement between Thailand and the United States. And of course, relationship refers also to the social, cultural ones. It's no accident that I'm a great fan of American football and baseball. And that is shared by a lot of Thai people because we are connected culturally as well. With regard to China, it is also a historical relationship. We've been, as the only independent country in Southeast Asia, we survived colonialism. We never had to be colonized. So we've had a historical perspective. We've dealt with the Chinese, whether under the Mongol dynasty, under the Han Chinese dynasty, and under the Manchus. And of course, nowadays, with the People's Republic of China. So we understand, I guess, both the challenges and possible potentials of dealing with a very large and powerful neighbor. And so our relationship with China is likewise based on mutual interests, not a secure relationship as much as an economic and perhaps a cultural people. We have Thai Chinese in the population. So that is the historical, I guess, cultural context of our relationship. So how do we navigate, so to speak, avoiding the use of the word balance? We base it on the interests. There are certain interests that we promote more strongly with the United States on areas where we see very much eye to eye, promoting human rights and fundamental freedoms, for example. And perhaps sometimes with China on issues like poverty alleviation, where some of the problems we share are more similar. All right, so it is not as if we have to pick and choose. We will drive our partnerships based on the mutual interests that we see with any country. And what we've tried to do, just to round it out, what we've tried to do is we try to bring the region as part of the engagement. So for Thailand, ASEAN is very important, as is APEC. The frameworks of ASEAN and APEC allow smaller countries to engage with our two largest partners, United States and China, in a platform, in an arrangement where there is give and take, where there is the use of international norms and the use of mutual global interests, where these things come into play. And that, in my view, is a win-win. So these are some of the ways and means how we try to calibrate our multifaceted relationship with both China and the United States. So that is how we'd like to kick off. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, Ambassador, you mentioned that Singapore and your leaders over the years, and I remember I had the privilege of hearing Lee Kuan Yew speak, your prime minister, a number of times, and you say there was always a strong message: the U.S. needs to stay engaged in Asia and pay attention. Pay attention was one of the many messages that came through, and much wisdom, and at the same time understand China. But I wonder, as we come to the end of the Biden administration, I know you're both sitting ambassadors, and I'm not going to try to put you on the spot or anything, but the refrain of the Biden years has been allies and partners, certainly in Europe, but even in many ways, most especially in East Asia and in Asia as a whole, in the Indo-Pacific, as we now call it. I don't know if you use Indo-Pacific, but that seems to be what we're using now. And it's been both bilateral and multilateral, and of course you mentioned ASEAN, and I think the Biden administration has talked about a lattice work of various multilateral agreements as well as bilateral. Singapore, it seems, is not so much an official part of some of those, I mean, whether it's the Quad or others, but I just wonder if you could talk about your own sense of where those partnerships are and those relationships, what you think has worked best. I mean, both, and you say there's a strong business element to this too, and what you think, if you were now talking to the next administration, needs to be carried on.
I think all credit to the Biden administration for reinvigorating alliances and partnerships, right? Which had probably perhaps not been given the degree of attention that deserved over the previous number of years. And I think you're really not only looking at security architectures like Quad and AUKUS and so on, but you're also trying to look at economic architectures. And IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, was a useful construct. It, of course, does not replace the CPTPP that both candidate Trump and candidate Hillary Clinton decided it was not possible to support if either of them came into power post the Obama era. A lost opportunity as far as we're concerned. How does Singapore look at some of these economic architectures? For us, the direct benefit actually is quite marginal. Singapore, you might know, would have a series of very, very good bilateral agreements with many of the countries that represented in CPTPP or even in IPEF. But our belief is that these economic architectures are important because it is part of what allows the US to remain present, engaged in the region. If you look at what has evolved since CPTPP, DEPA, which is Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, both without the US in it, China knocking on doors and hoping very much to be a partner in both of them. RCEP, this is the Regional Cooperation Economic Partnership initiated by ASEAN with its key dialogue partners, includes China. It's worked very well. So you see a pattern of new architectures coming up that may completely exclude the US and may completely, over time, include China. And I suspect that there would be, in the decades ahead, a certain degree of regret, I hope in the US, but certainly in our part of the world, if the situation was to perpetuate. And hence, IPEF was important. Okay, many people complain that, oh, it doesn't have trade access, the trade pillar is not as robust as it should be. But I like to see it as the start of something that we could grow, something that we could build upon when the conditions are more appropriate, especially in domestic United States. The security architectures, I think more so AUKUS, clearly so, Quad, a mix of different priorities and goals that it aims for. But what it shows, I think, is that the US, in certain instances, are more comfortable working with so-called mini-laterals, bringing together like-minded partners in order to very, very quickly grow some of these areas of cooperation. We believe Southeast Asia is important to the US. Maybe it is ASEAN, the association of 10 Southeast Asian nations, that is less important to the US. And therefore, it is up to us to make sure that ASEAN not only stays united, not only remains credible, but is also the instrument of choice that the US can work with to further its engagement of Southeast Asia.
I did notice in the confirmation hearings of the Secretary of Defense designate, one question he was asked, it's a little bit of a trick question maybe, but can you name the countries of ASEAN? And he said Japan, Korea, and Australia. So there's work to be done. I mean, he's.
No. To be fair, you can't expect somebody coming in like that who is going to bone up on so many subjects to have the ready answers to everything. The more important thing is he prepared to engage?
Yeah.
Is he prepared to listen? And if he is, look, we're happy to try and bring him up to speed.
Fair enough. Absolutely. And it did show that it was one of the areas of the world that was raised in the questions, which is also a sign that people are paying attention. So absolutely, no. But this, jobs in Washington.
I agree with my Singaporean friend, Louis, that I think that there are many things that ASEAN member states agree upon, but I think that there's one important thing that we agree upon, which is relevant to the discussion today, is that we all want the United States to be present. We all want the United States to be engaged in Southeast Asia. For Thailand, Southeast Asia and ASEAN is almost synonymous. Not because we created ASEAN in 1967, but because I think with the way the region is slowly integrating itself, becoming an ASEAN community, I think at some point, ASEAN and Southeast Asia should be more or less synonymous. But of course, because of the diversity within ASEAN, each of us have, the importance of bilateral relations remain the same. So what I'd just like to add to this is that one of the important, shall we say, side benefits, and I put that in quotations because it could be misinterpreted, is the fact that we have what we call the ASEAN-centered regional architecture, whether it is ASEAN itself, whether it is the very useful ASEAN-U.S. strategic partnership, which is going strong, whether it is the East Asia Summit, which brings together the 18 important countries in the Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region, These platforms generate what we call a collective sense of what needs to be the priority areas for the region. But also importantly, and I think this is important for countries like the United States and other large countries, it is also a venue, a platform for bilateral and mini diplomacy, I guess, for big countries to engage in a platform that ASEAN provides, neutral and innocuous, and no one loses face coming to an ASEAN meeting, but it is a venue where high stakes diplomacy can be conducted by major powers. And it is no surprise that the United States and China have used ASEAN-related forum or platforms to engage in such discussions, which is good. We believe dialogue helps. Even Thailand itself has offered itself to be venue or to be a facilitator for any discussions that the United States and China may wish to engage in. It has happened last year with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Wang Yi of China engaged in Bangkok on a wide range of issues in the dialogue. Anything that we contribute is fine, but the important message is that we want the United States to continue to be engaged, to be present in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, and in ASEAN-related arrangements, whether they be economic or political. Let me just add something else, is that I think the bilateral relationships will continue to be important, and that's important for any country in Southeast Asia. The strategic partnership between China and the United States will continue, and it's also multifaceted. New areas that we are looking into, digital technology, advanced technology, cybersecurity, and even including artificial intelligence. These are areas I think Thailand and some member states of ASEAN would be interested to continue to promote engagement with the United States. So this is, I think, important. The important message is that the United States remains engaged in the region, bilaterally, regionally, plurilaterally, whatever arrangement works, is comfortable to the United States. I think we'll be able to find a way to engage. Thank you.
I want to return a little bit to the trade issue, because I appreciate very much what you had to say about that, Ambassador Liu, and some of the various agreements that which have gone further than others. But how do you see that going forward? And of course, now we have a lot of talk of tariffs and how those might play into, and we have to wait and see, obviously, how that plays out. What do you see as maybe the most useful areas where a lot of the businesses here, American business and others might engage in trying to build on or adapt some of the work that's been done? I mean, that goes into a lot of areas. You've mentioned some as well, Ambassador, whether it's supply chains, all of that. What do you see as maybe the most likely areas for some, if not continuity and forward progress, but also areas to watch out for?
Go
ahead. Yeah, either of you, yeah.
Okay. Look, we've become very accustomed, very comfortable to that rules-based, multilateral, globalized trading system, right? Mm-hmm. And we feel the unease at how it is shifting. And so the paradigm, I would say, and I'll use of the past, the paradigm of the past was premised on fostering interdependence. The paradigm of the future, actually of the present and the future, is premised on avoiding overdependence. So you're going from fostering interdependence, unlocking it, and moving towards avoiding overdependence. And for the US, it's overdependence on China, overdependence on Chinese companies, inside or outside of China, avoiding overdependence on entities that might be partially or wholly or whatever way in it owned or controlled or influenced by Chinese individuals that may or may not have some link back to the Communist Party in Beijing. And these are shifts that will take place, and painfully so, over time. The markers are not quite clear. Since we started on this thing about navigation, so let me just use an analogy. Navigation at sea is not complicated.
Right.
The shoals, the hazards are clearly marked most of the time. most of the time. I mean, sometimes submarines knock into something, you know, and the underwater is less clearly marked, but most of the time the shoals and the hazards are marked. But when you try to drive a desk along the corridors of power, you tend to run over quite a number of toes. And be careful which toes you run over, okay? But anyway, that's a digression. and the point is that countries, large or small, companies, near or far, will have to navigate this shift from interdependence to avoiding overdependence, which means that who you partner with, where you locate, who you employ are all going to be important. Give an example of Singapore, maybe. We believe, and we still believe, that we are a place where companies, R&D centers, regardless of where you originate from, businesses, ideas, talent can come together, and it is a place to meet for people to work and to cooperate. We believe that cross-pollination results in better, stronger, more robust ideas. But increasingly, you not only have to think about cross-pollination, you've got to make sure that you avoid cross-pollution. All right? Where entities, where ideas, where individuals, where technologies that should not mix will not be allowed to be commingled. And the more a place like Singapore can safeguard that, then the better we are able to continue on the path of a certain degree of cross-pollination, right? Which means that you've got to rethink all your assumptions, you've got to rework all the parameters that you have been comfortable with, and you've got to devise new rules that make sure that both parties or multiple parties are going to be comfortable with, that when I share with you my IP, when I release some of the technology to you, it is not going to fall into hands that it should not fall into.
Again, I'm not a Navy person, but I think the analogy that Ambassador Liu provided is very apt, and I'll take it a little bit in another dimension, so to speak. I'm a science fiction fan, so let's use a space analogy. I think one of the things that you will find as business people engaging in Southeast Asia or in the wider Indo-Pacific market, there will come a time when as you navigate through space this time, there are possibilities of what I would call black holes and curved space. All right, now what are those? Black holes and curved space. Those are scientific areas where the laws of physics do not apply. In other words, you will be faced with situations where we probably saw it a little bit before the pandemic, things that you have not prepared for, all right, things that does not go according to expected rules, or even in a more worst case scenario where there are developments or situations where the rules are not being applied, possible conflict areas. We hope that doesn't happen, but these are things that you prepare for. So as we move, as was mentioned, from being dependency to avoiding overdependency, I think at some point, at least the approach that we in Thailand would probably take is to look at redundancies. Redundancies is probably necessary. It's more costly, but you're going to have to be able to prepare for different scenarios. Yes, we will try to continue to be interdependent because we're a small country. We require trade investment and tourism, for example. We need it for a country like Thailand. We can never move away from being too overdependent or being totally independent of everyone else, because that's not economically feasible. What we're going to do is to find the right balance between the two and factor in what we call redundancy, which probably means that we're having to look for new markets, new trading partners. Thailand, for example, that is why we are applying to be a member of the OECD, because we think that these are the standards that we'll have to apply in the long run. That's where the source of technology, trade investment will be in the long run. And that is what we are trying to do. And this is part of our strategy of trying to prepare for different scenarios that might happen. I think business people, you know very well, you will have to prepare for different scenarios as well. You will probably have to prepare perhaps for a system whereby you can continue to engage with China if you have interest there, and of course with United States, Western economies, and others. This is the fact of life, and that is why we will have to make that preparation to avoid black holes and curved space in space. Thank you.
Yeah, from the sea to space, that's pretty good. Yeah, okay. Make it
We complement each other.
That's right. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and I'm sorry it's such a short session, but it's been a very rich conversation. But you've already touched on it, and I want to leave you a few minutes to say whatever you'd like to say, but you don't have to be guided by my comment. But as I've listened to the conversation throughout the day, and obviously there's a diversity of opinions within the room, which is great, I think there's a real sense that, you know, most of us are seeking in the U.S.-China relationship, and again, I know as sitting ambassadors, you're not going to sit and pontificate on what we should do about China, but I mean, there's a sense of we want to see this go in a positive direction.
Absolutely.
You know, we want to see, you know, and I think there's a real search for, you know, how do we manage this? I think you've given us some good ideas, particularly when it comes to some of these, you know, trade and business issues and so on. But I mean, any kind of words of advice you'd have for us?
Time is short, so let me say, we understand China and the U.S. need to compete strategically, but you also need to cooperate operationally and tactically, and you need to converse meaningfully.
Let me just end with perhaps a sports analogy. I'm looking forward to the college football finals on Monday, is it right? Ohio State and Notre Dame, and perhaps even the Super Bowl. But I think that's the analogy I'd like to bring out. Listen, at the end of the day, we know the two most powerful economies will compete because that's the way it's being done, all right? But I'd like to keep in the context of like a college football final, the Super Bowl. Compete on the field. Do what you wish. But there are rules, right? Within a Super Bowl competition, there are referees, there are spectators. Just make sure that the spectators, the referees, mutually benefit. Yeah, we enjoy the competition, we get from it, the benefits from that, it's a mutual benefit at the long run. And at the end of the day, after the end of the Super Bowl or the college football final, the two teams shake hands and continue the partnership. As a small country, it is certainly our aspiration that the two major powers, number one and number two, and indeed any major powers would find a way to work out a relationship. It could be competition, but at the end of the day, as long as the rules are being reinforced, as long as others are not neglected, as long as we share in the mutual benefit from that stable relationship, that stable competition, I think this is something that we can look forward to. We're a small country. We cannot make an impact on how major countries engage. But we think that a competition within certain parameters with mutual benefit to all is certainly in the interest of business. I think that's the message I like to give. And with that, I look forward to the college football final and the Super Bowl.
Well, thank you very much. You can see it. That was terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now,
Thank
Steve,
you.
you guys are
Thank you.
terrific. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ambassadors. We're definitely going to need all of your help as we navigate ahead. Thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us. This concludes our public conference, our 8th and final program of our Seeking Truth Through Facts U.S. China program series is going to be next week in Seattle at our Sister Center on January 23rd. You're welcome to join us in person or join us online. We host monthly programs in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Seattle, and virtually. Please sign up and be a member if you are not already. And save the date. Our annual gala, Asia Game Changers West, is on Friday, April 11th. Save the date now. A big thank you again to our speakers, our sponsors, and our team. Please give a round of applause again to our team volunteers. And on behalf of Asia Society Northern California, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next year.